Hey, what's up, fantasy fans? This is Mitchell at FF Real Talk, and I got a little special treat for y'all this week. I'm going to be doing an alternate list that will actually correlate with the waiver ad pickups list this week. And this what I'm going to be doing right now, though, is I tweeted it out earlier this morning that I might be doing a list on 5 running backs and 5 receivers that you drafted that you could safely drop. And the reason I'm doing this is because we're reaching that point in the season where it's getting clear who are going to be heading, more so who's going to be heading to the playoffs and who's got a way uphill battle before they even have a chance to get there. And more importantly than anything, no matter who you are, no matter what your rank is, especially if you're trying to get to the playoffs, you got players on your team that are probably underperforming, and we're getting to that threshold where the waiver wire is getting barren more so. It'll be at a point where it's completely barren, but there are still good players out there, and you should be having those good players as opposed to holding on to these names that you drafted that you don't necessarily need. Now, the disclaimer with this list is this is not me telling you that if you have any of these 10 players, drop them just verbatim, just drop them hands down. If you're in a 14, 16 team league, maybe even some 12 team leagues, don't just drop them. These are players that if you're in a 10 team league, or if you're in a situation where other players I'll be mentioning in the waiver pickups or even last week's waiver pickups are out there, I'd rather have some of those players than these players. Again, this is not just saying cut them. I'm saying if you think that it's going to make your team better, you might as well go ahead, because these guys are underperforming and you're not going to be ever feeling safe starting them. So they're solid considerations, and some you don't have to have guilt with if you cut them. That's the way I'm viewing it. So again, not verbatim, but feel free to cut these guys for better performing guys on the waiver. We're going to go in descending order with it too. The first one would be the last one I would cut, and then the number 5 one would be the easiest one to cut from the list. So we're going to start with running backs. The first one, CJ Spiller. He's had a total of 38 fantasy points this season. We all know at this point the guy's talented, the guy's fast, the guy's elusive, and the guy is extremely explosive. He has the ability to make plays that very few players in the league can do. But the problem is it's the offense he's on. I don't know what the issues are with Buffalo. I mean, well, I know they have a sorry offensive line, and CJ Spiller has been on the wrong side of the committee for the last several years, and Fred Jackson isn't going anywhere, and it makes owning him a hard thing. When you draft CJ Spiller, you draft him in hopes that he'll be that guy that he has shown to be in spurts, but he's never been fully consistent. And let's be honest, he's really only had one really good year since he became a fantasy option. So that makes him a drag to own. So if you got players out there like a Brandon Bolden, even Jared McKinnon, and say like a Storm Johnson or whatever have you, that you want to consider this looking like their opportunities are growing in terms of running backs, or even like a Ronnie Hillman who's got more of a clear path to success, because we never know which one of these guys are going to pop off, but we do know who's not performing, and CJ Spiller is one of those. So again, if you don't have a good option out there that it would be worth dropping, like say a Brandon Oliver, maybe hold on to him, but I would have no problem cutting CJ Spiller for, say, a Brandon Oliver easy, or Andre Williams easily. The second one among them that would be, toward, like I say, if I'm saying 2, that means the second least that I would do it. The number 5 one is the easiest one to do to me. Number 2 is Chris Johnson. So far, he's had 30 fantasy points. Look, he's finished as a true commodity in fantasy, and he's been done for a while. I mean, I had no confidence in him moving, from the Titans to the Jets, being any more of a bolster of anything. He hasn't been able to be trusted for the last 4 years, and it feels like longer than that because he's a hard player to own. And Chris Ivory has a job locked up. It's nothing to even talk about, really. And Rex Ryan's not going to be playing this game with him to give him the chance to be good because Rex is coaching for his job, rather. So if you got Chris Johnson out there, there are definitely options out there I'd much rather have than him. So feel free to pull the trigger on letting him go if you deem that worthy for your team. Number 3. Montee Ball. Whenever you get to the point, see the thing about Chris Johnson and even somewhat with CJ Spiller, they're a little easier to let go because you got CJ Spiller in like maybe the 5th or 6th round, or you got Chris Johnson, even later than that. But when you talk about Montee Ball, he was on the cusp of first round selections, and then after the Le'Veon Bell news, he became that. Almost the end of the first round, early second round pick. And he's had double fantasy points only one time this season with a total of 23. But let's get to the meat of him, though. What do we really know about him? All we know is he ran crazily and was so very dominant in college, but he hasn't been anything in the pros. What we do know is that he can't pass protect. What we do know is that he's got fumbling issues and he's injury prone. And so far, he's shown nothing of his clear chance this year to get the starting job, well over Ronnie Hillman and with no Sean Marino out of town. We don't know this guy. This guy may very well not be a star in the NFL, and again, though he's injured now, that's still another issue. You just can't hold on to injured people. And like I said, with a total of 23 fantasy points, I would much rather have a player on his team right now than him, which is Ronnie Hillman, because it seems like once anything's messing with this team, the Super Bowl ready, they're not going to play around with it. So Montee Ball's not going to be something that will be something you just got to keep if you got other options out there. So I would be letting him go for certain players if they're available also. Number 4, Toby Gerhart. Total of 20 fantasy points this year. Okay, let's be honest with ourselves here. Did anyone ever really think Toby Gerhart was going to be a player that was a number 1 fantasy running back on a team, trade or not? Come on, not really. I mean, let's just really, really look at this. Though he's good at pass protection and security, he has base talent. He has even less speed and even less than that in terms of elusiveness. I don't know about y'all, but that's a fullback to me. That's the formula of a fullback. And he's basically the opposite of Montee Ball. Montee Ball has that speed and has that elusiveness, but he don't pass protect or he doesn't have ball security. But Toby Gerhart's more injury prone than Montee Ball, and that's bad. So he hasn't been anything. He's got a total of 20 points through this far in the fantasy season, and that's worse than a lot of players that have never been been put on the waiver wire. I mean, I'd rather have Anton Smith than him at this point. And whenever you start saying I'd rather have a player on his team better, like Storm Johnson, that's when you know it's time for a player to go. So don't feel bad cutting Toby Gerhart. I mean, he's not a featured back, and we knew it even with the move from the Vikings to the Jags. We were just hopeful. But, you can let that one go. Speaking of the Vikings, the number 1 player that you can let go, and I know you don't want to hear it, but y'all, let Adrian Peterson go. This dude ain't going to be playing no more this year. He's just not. I understand the temptation to hold on to this guy. He was your number 1 selection out here. When you do that, it's hard to let him go. Hard to let go the person you spent your number 1. It can make and break your season. It made and break. One of my leagues, I'm 1-4-1 in. That was a league I had Adrian Peterson in. I know what it's about, but I'm not going to hold on to him in hopes that he'll come back. He's done. Just let it go, and because your playoffs is dependent on it. And everybody on this list I'm giving, they're 80% or more or something like that owned. So that means people are holding these guys. Adrian Peterson is somebody you do not need to be holding on to. And if you do, you go ahead, but he's not going to play this year, straight up. And in terms of honorable mention with running backs, I've just got one, and that's Zach Stacy. You've been seeing it week after week. Benny Cunningham is starting to outshine him. And more importantly, last week you saw Trey Mason break loose. We're getting close to the end of the Zach Stacy fairy tale. He had us all fooled. If you drafted him, you got him in the third round, maybe even some places the second. That was a bust this draft year. Don't do it yet. But as this thing starts to flesh out, he's going to be droppable. And right now, I would drop him for Brandon Oliver. So that's to me clear. I would even drop him for Jared McKinnon right now. So, that's just another one to consider. Now we're going to go to the wide receivers. And again, this is in descending order. Number one, with 33 points on the year, Cordarrelle Patterson. This is hard on a lot of us that really, really boosted and gave him props going into the season because we thought this was going to be the chance for him to take over the old Percy Harvin role because he's got all of the talent, though he was raw. Cordarrelle Patterson didn't show us nothing last year, and he ain't showing us nothing this year. Immense talent, but besides the fact that the team's not using him correctly, they got a quarterback that's trying to find his way. And I almost think really that Cordarrelle Patterson is one of those players that's not going to be good as a Viking. I think he's going to have to be traded to be good. Right now, owning him is extremely difficult. And I've got him in several leagues. And he's been on my bench pretty much since week 3. So there are players out there like a Mohamed Sanu, Andre Holmes, stuff like that I would much rather have, or either the two giant players that are available out there in some, like Ruben Randall or Odell Beckham Jr. You want to have them over Cordarrelle Patterson. So, don't be afraid to pull the trigger on releasing him because I just don't see it coming anymore. Number 2 is Keenan Allen. It's a little different than Cordarrelle Patterson in the fact that any one of these games, Keenan Allen might break loose. He's got 26 points this year, has had only one good game. And he's had only one good game in that explosive passing attack with Phillip Rivers. So it just doesn't really make sense to me what's happening there. Is he a one-year bust? I don't know. He's got the talent. That isn't the problem. But I do think some of what last year is to this year is a mirage. And maybe he'll pull it together. He has a potential to, and he's on the offense that can help it happen. But if this far, we're going into week 7, he's been struggling to get it going with San Diego, I don't know what else to say. And in that same breath, I'd much rather have Sanu or Holmes or Beckham than Keenan Allen at this point. This whole list, everything I'm saying in this video is about players who can help you win these weeks while you're still trying to hold on to names. So it's just not worth it. Number 3, Marques Colston. 28 points on the year. This, to me, is nothing new because I've never liked owning him. It's hard for me to own any Saints receiver because of the way Breeze spreads it around. But the problem this year is something's wrong with the Saints offense. They're not spreading it right. And him, Brandon Cooks, a guy I was highly touting this year or whatever, they're starting to suffer with it. Marquise is heavily owned, but he ain't doing anything this year. He's been a frustrating player to own, and particularly last year with the injury, and right now he is. I mean, there's some times where he ain't even out there on the field. So it's just another situation to where you want to hold the name, or do you want to pounce on the last chance you have of Mohamed Sanu over a Colston? It's up to you, but I'm not going to hold Colston out there if I've got some of these other guys to be replacing him with. Number 4 is Dwayne Bowe. 19 points this year. Just let him go. It's nothing to talk about. It's really nothing to get into. I'm not really even going to waste my time. He's a player he's been for the past 3 years. Dwayne Bowe is just not that dude anymore. I mean, he just ain't. He ain't over the top threat, and his slot work is just paltry at best. So don't hold him. He's 80% or something on. There's much better talent out there than him. And number 5, Riley Cooper, also heavily on, 22 points on the season. I'm not even going to talk about this fool. If you hold on to him after these duds he's been putting up, I probably have a different issue with him than how he's playing. So, I personally don't like him. So again, I don't know why you're holding him. He's a waste. So, but that's pretty much what I wanted to say in terms of that. But there's going to be one more thing I'm adding to this video as a little bit of a bonus. A lot of people are starting to see something I said in the beginning of the season with some of the rules. I was giving some tips for playing, and I'm seeing people tweet about it, and I tweeted about it this past week. For all of y'all that thought defense and drafting them early can help you, I'm hoping you guys are learning your lesson right here. I'm just gonna give you a few stats, and this has nothing to do with drop and add really. This has to do with just knowing this is for the future. When you talk about team defense and success of it, what you want to do is break even. If you play in ESPN standard leagues, you start off with 10 points in any given defense. And if you do nothing worse than a certain amount, you'll leave the game with 10. Or as the opposition puts on points, that 10 becomes 9, becomes 8, becomes all the way down to where there's negative numbers. Or if that 10 you start with, you start getting touchdowns, interceptions, sacks, or whatever have you, the number increases. But in a general week, you want to keep that 10 points you start with. That's the way I look at success in defense. If you can have 10 points in a given week, you've done fine. Even 8 is okay. But I want to maintain the 10-point baseline. Let's talk about that defense that everyone was taking in single-digit rounds this year, the Seattle Seahawks. They've gotten baseline that 10 points one time this season. And 3 of their 5 games, they've had 5 points or less. They are currently ranked number 20 in defense. And everybody was flying to take them off the board all early in rounds when I was saying don't bite on defense, take them late, because they are not dependable. Defenses, you can't count on what they're going to do. I stream defenses year round. Put in one that's going to be the best matchup and it suits me well. The only times I have defensive issues is when I'm starting a team but then I drafted, i.e. the Bengals. I'll get to them in a second. The second consensus defensive pick was the Carolina Panthers. They are ranked number 22. The Bengals was one of the top 5 defenses that was picked. They're in the bottom 5 of the league, and they've had 2 straight weeks of negative points and have a total of 15 points, which is just 5 over a 1-week baseline. Look, man, y'all really need to understand that this defense thing is worse than kicker to me. You have these teams struggle with other teams that they should be beating in all these different things and all these different angles. Defense is not dependable year to year. They can be real good in real life or even help you win the game or whatever, but they can be killer on your statistics fantasy-wise. Stream defenses. Just recently, you're seeing what's happening. Last week, not this week, the week before, the Green Bay Packers went nuts with 28 or something like that fantasy points. They wasn't even drafted. The Eagles and the Lions, they were lowly drafted, and they're among the top 5 teams in the league. The Titans are in there among the top 10 teams in the league. It's just not worth it because you'll never know. Just all I'm saying right here, this has nothing to do with waivers or whatever. It's just something to tell y'all if y'all got these defenses drafted, and like with this week, people that are considering, holding on to certain players that are on buys, teams or whatever, like the Bengals, just drop them. don't carry two defenses. I said it in the 20 rules earlier or whatever. If you drop the Bengals, nobody's going to go claim them. And if they do claim them, you let them go ahead. Because the Bengals isn't going to prove to be anything more valuable than a team you can stream week to week. Play the matchup game with defenses. Stream Ds. I can't tell you any more than that. So, and lesson here. Don't waste draft picks high on a defense. That's the whole point of this. Whatever. So, take that what you will. But yeah, that's going to be the end of that. And after this, I'm going to post the waiver ads and free agents for the week. So you'll see some of these players that I'm talking about that you could be replacing those 10 players I listed with. So yeah, keep, like I say in every video, keep following at FF Real Talk on Twitter, or subscribe to the channel. And if you got questions, hit me up on Twitter and I'll answer them, or leave questions in the comments. And we'll see you soon. All right.